Hello, Jenna. Welcome to the Feminine Frequency.
Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for having me. So excited to be here.
Yeah, it's such an honor to be in this space together after a little over 6 months of working really intimately together through the private mentorship. And I'm just really honored and grateful for you being here to share about your journey and really give some insight to our listeners, to women who are on their own healing journeys of what has shifted for you and the transformation that's happened in your life, because I have found it to be so inspiring to work with you and to see the changes that you've made in your relationship and your career, but mostly around like who you've become in this process. And I'm really excited to for us to try and put some words on that today. It might be a little bit complicated and challenging because there's so much that's happened, but we're going to do our
Yeah.
best.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm so excited. I couldn't agree more with everything you're saying. So,
Yeah, amazing. So, for our listeners, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself, let everyone know who you are, where you live, and we'll start there.
yeah. So my name is Jenna. I'm 26 years old. I currently live in London, England, but I actually was born and raised in Connecticut in the States. And I moved over here about 4 years ago for a master's program. And now I work here and live here full time. So I work for an art gallery, an online art gallery, and I manage all of the artists that we work with and manage a residency program in specific. So helping new and graduate and emerging artists kind of bridge their way into the international art world and art market and helping them become more empowered and entrepreneurial. And yeah, it's exciting. I love being here in the UK. Um, and yeah, it's kind of my home for now.
Beautiful. Yeah, so awesome how your journey has led you there and doing work that you love to do, and also in a position where you can empower other artists and other people through just being yourself too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great. Thank you for your introduction. And I'd love to go back to kind of where you were on your journey before we started working together, because you had already been working with therapists, you had overcome
Mm.
an eating disorder, you had done a lot of inner work, yet there was still another layer of healing and growth that you were looking for when you reached out. So tell us a little bit about how you found out about my private coaching, and then also kind of where you were.
Oh my gosh, this is, yeah, it's quite the process and the journey of what brought me to kind of finding you and starting to talk to you. Yeah, as you mentioned, I pretty much from as long as I can remember, I've been in therapy. My parents got divorced when I was quite young, so they kind of put us into family therapy. And then, as you mentioned, I struggled with an eating disorder in high school, so I was kind of in and out of therapy then. And I think I've done a decent amount of work on myself. And have always been really intuitive and empathic and have always loved, like, I've loved going to therapy because I just love kind of understanding myself more. And when I moved to London, I was in a really good place. I was just having a lot of fun doing my thing, and then COVID happened. And obviously that was quite difficult for me, as it was for everyone. Ended up staying in London during that time, and I really, really took that opportunity to kind of look and reflect deeper into myself. And I did a lot of like self studying and reading books and everything. It was great. And I just kind of, it opened up my eyes to this like whole new realm of like healing and work that I wasn't really familiar with. What particularly led me to work with you, is kind of as we were re-emerging into normal life, my anxiety kind of spiraled. Like I was in a really, really bad place. Everything was just really overwhelming for me. And I was waking up with crippling anxiety for like 3 months straight. And kind of just thought that that was going to be the way that I was going to have to live my life. It was really, really tough. My relationship that I'm in with my partner, we got together right in the beginning of COVID. So we had spent all of this time together in the pandemic, and then life was opening up, and suddenly we had our own lives, and all of my friends had their own lives. And it was really, really terrifying. And I kind of went through this breakdown. And I started, I guess, after 3 months of dealing with that, I kind of started exploring some more of this healing, these different healing techniques and like podcasts and things. And as I kind of pulled myself out of that dark place, I came across Amy's podcast. And I just remember I was home back in the States for the summer, and the anxiety was still, it was happening every single day. But I was taking a walk and I came across your episode on feminine masculine polarity in relationships. And I just remember like listening to that episode and I was like, this is incredible. Like this insight is so amazing. I've never really heard it from this perspective. And at that point, I was kind of struggling in my relationship with the anxiety, was kind of leading to a lot of overthinking, a lot of like anxious attachment. And it was kind of most of the anxiety was coming out in those ways. So I heard that episode and I was like, wow, this is so interesting. And I just became addicted to the podcast. I honestly listened to like episode after episode. And then I think I DM'd you on Instagram and I was asking about some more information about that specific episode about the polarity. And I think at that point, you were like, I'd love to just hop on a call and talk to you about this more. And we met and we had like an introduction session. And I just can't even describe it, but like sitting on that call, I just felt like all of this light and joy, and it just felt so right. And I remember like leaving that call feeling hope for the first time in so long. Like I
Mm.
was just beaming with excitement. And I was like, after everything we talked about in that session and what the coaching would look like and what the experience would look like, I just knew that it was going to be the right thing for me. And I think I was really ready at that point to take the next step. I kind of was in a rock bottom in a way, and I was still in therapy during that time. And it clearly wasn't, it was great to talk to someone about like what was going on in my life, but I wasn't seeing any results in my day to day life. I was still living in this state of anxiety and fear, and just constant like, yeah, anxiousness and anxious attachment in my relationship. So when we talked about kind of what this program would look like, I just knew, like, I just had this feeling that it was 100% the right thing to do. And it was like an immediate yes after we ended the call. And I just was like, okay, I just need to figure out how to kind of make this work. But yeah, that's what led me to you. And I'm so glad that all of that happened.
Yeah, it's really powerful to reflect back on where you were because it wasn't even that long ago. If we think about it,
No,
it
yeah.
was like 6 months ago. And yeah, it's so interesting how you had been on the path for a really long time. And of course, there's circumstances and situations in our lives that bring up different triggers and different layers of healing that we get to look at. So, for a lot of people who are listening, that the pandemic and the shift out of, lockdown did have an effect on people's mental health. And yeah, I'm so grateful that we crossed paths and that we've been able to be on this journey together. So let's talk a little bit more about maybe the difference. I love therapy and I think therapy
Mm.
is really important and there's a time and a place for it. And I'd love to just kind of pick your brain a little bit from your experience of what the difference was for you between therapy and the coaching that we've done together.
Yeah, I would say like therapy was great for kind of like I mean, we did this as well, like unpacking all the trauma and everything, but kind of just having that support and someone to talk to every week in therapy and just kind of like almost just have someone listen, like without necessarily giving advice or just kind of having a sounding board. Whereas with coaching, it was much more of a hands-on approach. And while you did listen to me and we talked about all of those things and more, it was like really like you giving me space to kind of tailor it to what I needed at that time and giving me like really helpful feedback in ways that I could implement that into my life every day. And I remember even after our first session, like there were things that just little tools that I was learning from you that I started implementing in every day and noticing a difference just in the first few weeks of working with you. And I think, yeah, just with coaching, way more hands on, way more kind of real life. I don't know if that makes sense, but kind of like it felt more tangible in a way. And I just really noticed results and actually seeing myself progress and get better, as opposed with therapy. It was kind of like beating a dead horse almost.
Mm,
Just kind of, which is great. I needed that at the time to be able to like vent to someone and kind of unpack some of the deeper trauma and like understand it. But I think with coaching and with my experience with you, it was kind of like just constantly going back and forth off of each other and growing and expanding and looking at how like I could carry that into my own life after our sessions.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And when you said, actually seeing results, starting to see shifts in the first few weeks, I'd love for you to share some of the things that you've noticed, because you're really self-aware and you have a lot of understanding about yourself. And you had that even before we started working together to a large extent. So if you were to reflect on like who Jenna was before and what are some of the shifts, like the biggest shifts that you've felt within yourself, how would you describe those? What are some of your main shifts that you've noticed?
I think so. There's a few. I think the first is just like noticing the confidence that I have in myself. I've always been a very outwardly confident person, but internally, like I really found it hard to trust myself and make decisions. Like I was always looking for external help and like going to people and being like, what should I do? But with our coaching, you really gave me the space to make my own decisions. And we're so like, you were so understanding and accepting and like non-judgmental. So you really gave me the ability to like see kind of like my options and decide for myself. So that's the first thing I think, like that lack of self-trust that I had in myself, which like bled into my relationship with my partner. I was very, very anxiously attached. And just constantly really struggling with trust. And I think that goes back to like things that I experienced in my childhood with my parents' divorce. But now there's such a shift in my internal confidence. It's not about what happens when I'm like, I mean, I have noticed shifts when I'm out like with friends and meeting new people. I find myself being way more open, but it's the internal when I'm alone, how safe and secure I feel in myself. Is really like a day and night change. Like it's pretty crazy to think like I couldn't being alone was so painful for me before. Like it was so
Mm,
difficult. And now I have not like this is even though I'm in this serious relationship and we're probably more serious than we have been and we were at that time in my life, like I'm spending more time with myself. I'm moving in with my partner, but at the same time, like I feel like I have gained so much more independence because I feel safe with myself and I feel safe in the things that I'm doing and I trust myself. So I think like that self-trust and confidence is a huge thing. Also anxiety just in general, like that has diminished so much. I was always overthinking everything all the time. And while I still do experience anxiety like time to time, it's the way that I'm able to process that is different than before. Like I'm really able to sit with something and look at it and feel it in my body in a calm perspective instead of freaking out and just like treating it more with love and like incorporating embodiment and movement into dealing with anxiety as opposed to like shutting down, going into fight or flight. I was so terrified of ever feeling anxious. And now it really doesn't scare me because I know that it will pass and I'll get through it. And it's an opportunity to look at things deeper. And then I would say the other like big area that I've noticed a shift in is just like the balance in my life. I really have been able to create a life that is so much more like balanced and in line with what I love to do, as opposed to feeling like I needed to do things. I've always loved to work out, but I think I've kind of had an unhealthy relationship with that in the past. So now I really just try to listen to my body and I'm way more intuitive in terms of like deciding what like little things like what I want to eat to how I want to move my body and incorporating like morning rituals and evening rituals into my routine. So having like that a balance between the feminine and masculine energy. So there's still a structure, but I'm way more gentle with myself and just forgiving with myself, I would
mhm.
say.
Yeah, one of the things that I've loved witnessing the most in your journey is that ability and to connect with your body and listen to it and really hear what she's asking you. When you need rest, listening to that. When notice that things feel maybe off with over exercising or kind of in certain food patterns, like really being so connected to your body
Yes.
and allowing her to guide you. And especially from someone who's had a past history with an eating disorder, like to be feel so safe in your body and to be so trusting of your body is
Yes.
really phenomenal. Like I really want to celebrate you for that, in how you have been honoring what she needs.
Thank you so much. And it's like, I just like think about, as you're like with an eating disorder, as you're recovering from that, it's important to have that structure and everything. But I think that that kind of went to its own extreme. And I've always struggled with finding that balance. And while I've had like a healthy relationship with food, it wasn't always like an amazing relationship that I wanted it to be. And now I just like, I know that if I'm feeling kind of, yeah, like you said, just being able to really like listen to what my body is saying, and it's always giving you cues and it's always speaking to you. And I just was never listening to it. And actually, when you do listen and your body's like, I need rest and I'm craving this and I want to eat this and this is what feels right. It actually everything ends up like flowing like unbelievably. Like I've never felt more in shape and healthy in my body, and I'm actually doing less but I'm listening to myself. It's so crazy like how that mental shift affects the physical body. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's super important to note, because a lot of people are like, oh, well, if I'm eating intuitively or moving intuitively, then that means I'm going to be lazy and I'm going to just like completely throw everything out the window. And like, that's definitely not true. And the body actually responds better, especially the female body responds better when
Yeah.
we are listening to her and when we're honoring what she's asking of us. So yeah, really beautiful that you shared that. So I'd love to go back to a couple of things that you shared about some inner shifts that you were experiencing. And one of those specifically was around the anxious attachment,
Yes.
specifically in your relationship. So I know that some people might know what anxious attachment is, some people might not, but for you, how is that showing up, that like lack of trust, that anxiety? Like, give me some examples of what would happen in your relationship when you were in that state.
So when I was in that state, it was a constant like fear of not being enough for my partner and a constant need to feel close to him is the best way that I can like describe it. And it didn't start off that way at all, but and I would say that this is the first partner that I've been with who's like very secure, and I've had a past of being in kind of more unhealthy relationships. So this was really new for me, and it took me a while to kind of get used to a healthier relationship or a healthy relationship. But yeah, when I was in that anxious attachment, yeah, feeling just like I needed closeness and I needed to constantly hear from him or be around him. And if I wasn't, it meant that like he didn't love me or something like that. Like if there was distance, anything that would create distance or tension, I would panic and be terrified that it was the end or that he was going to leave me or find someone better. Um, and that overthinking just it was like a continual spiral, which would then cause me to get really anxious and kind of like lash out and say things that I didn't mean, which would then cause even more distance and just create like a lot of anxiety, and I didn't know how to really handle it at all. And I think there was this like element of codependency as well. um, I was very much making decisions based off of what I thought that my partner wanted and like people pleasing. And it would end up causing resentment on my end because it wasn't coming from a genuine place. It's coming from this like people pleasing. So I think, yeah, to sum it up, it's like it felt like this constant need to be connected to him, like in any form. And it was like felt like very like desperate energy.
Yeah. Yeah. And what we work through is really about like the root of where all of that started from,
Mm,
because it's not about this particular partner
no.
necessarily. It really is like, what are the patterns that you had carried from your childhood, from previous relationships that are now showing up again in this partnership, and recognizing that you know, through doing the work in this partnership for yourself, that it's either going to serve this relationship or it's going to serve you in a future relationship. And I think that was a really huge turning point that we got
Yes.
to, where you got to that point where instead of feeling like, oh my God, what if this ends? What if this, doesn't work out? And feeling like you would kind of die if that happened, right? Like that
Yeah. Yeah.
codependent feeling of like, holy shit,
Genuinely.
like this
Yeah.
is the worst thing that could ever,
Mm.
ever happen. And so I'd love for you to share from your perspective, like what was that shift that we eventually got to, and that how did that shift within you then create a different dynamic in your relationship?
Yeah, it was really powerful, really crazy. But I kind of, like I mentioned, I got to a rock bottom and I was pretty much like, I can't live my life this way. I can't, either this relationship is not for me or it's going to work and it will be amazing. But I need to like 100% like focus on myself and my healing. And it was a change, I would say, an outlook of trusting myself and knowing that there is a greater plan for me, and that if things don't work out with my partner, I will be okay. And there's an even greater plan in store. But what I had to really look at was like my relationship with myself and look at some really hard like memories from my childhood of abandonment issues, and that really like stemmed back from such a young age, like as young of the age of 3, and like really looking at this like need to feel loved by other people, and specifically men, coming down from to the relationship that I had with my dad. And once I kind of was able to start looking at that and really heal, like comforting my inner child, that is where the shift happened, knowing that I have got me and that I'm safe with myself, and that no matter what happens, like I will always be there for myself. And it just kind of it was like a ripple effect of how it spilt over into my relationship with my partner and other relationships too. But because I started to trust myself, I could trust my partner. And I started feeling like slowly I started feeling very, very secure, and like everything else kind of fell into place around me. It was really wild to witness that. But as soon as I kind of took this pressure off of to get it right, and this dependency on another person, and really started looking at myself and what was going on internally, that's when the shift happened. And like it's just in these 6 months that we've been working together, like I just virtually have no anxiety when it comes to my relationship. Like it is crazy how secure I feel. And like the dynamic is so much healthier and more magnetic and just alive. Like it's really interesting to see that.
I got chills when you were talking about that, because it's such a significant process that you went through, taking your power back from thinking that you need to receive love externally from your partner and learning how to give that to yourself, and therefore not feeling that attachment or that anxiety for something externally to fill that void for you. And like you
Yeah.
said, through that, it has created a much healthier relationship dynamic. It's allowed for more intimacy, more authenticity and honesty. Like that's something else that I've really seen from you, both in
Yeah.
your relationship and at work, is
Yeah.
speaking your truth, and not being in that people pleasing, not wavering, but like knowing who you are, knowing what your truth is, and being really unapologetic about that, and also loving, like
Yeah.
being so unapologetic of like, this is my truth, and I get to share that. So yeah, was there anything that you wanted to share about what that was like to step into your power in that way?
Yeah, a couple of things that come to mind. Like first off, something that we worked on a lot was like the difference between like processing and projecting. So when something, I think in the past there were two kind of patterns with me, is if there was something I was really anxious about, I would just avoid talking about it because I was afraid of how another person would perceive it, how they would think about me. And then there were other cases where I would just like project right away without really thinking. So I knew that there had to be another way to go about this, where I could be like authentic and speak my truth, but also have it be in a way where I feel empowered in what I'm saying. So a big thing that we worked on was like when something happened, when I'm triggered, taking the time to really process that by myself and see if it's something that, is just coming up from something in my past, or if it's something that I'm feeling in my relationship or in work or with a friend. And if there does need to be a conversation with that person, and then coming to them from like a really empowered and like emotionally sound place. That was really huge, and that shift changed everything. And I think it's still been like a learning process. And there were a few times where like I would fall back into old patterns, and I just became more and more forgiving with myself, because it's like you're never gonna get it completely right, and like things happen, and it's actually about how you react to the situation. So even if I was having a tough day and I like projected something onto my partner, that same tool of being able to go back and reflect on that and be like, it's okay. And then, have a conversation with whoever afterwards, apologizing or taking ownership for whatever, um, has been, yeah, incredible. And I think with work too, like that has been, I asked for a raise during this time we were working together, and was so confident about what I wanted because I really took the time to like reflect on it first and believe it in myself. And then I was able to come from this empowered place with, again, without the fear of what they were going to say. I think in the past I would have held back, or yeah, not even brought that up, because I was too afraid of like being rejected or no, or them saying no. But then kind of realizing that, if you never ask, you're never going to get. And that was a huge shift, and it ended up all working out in the end.
Yeah, so beautiful. And what you're talking about there is like specifically about the reactivity is, of course, there's going to be things that come up in relationship in life that trigger us. Like that is going to happen. And the difference is, am I going to respond to this from a trauma response,
Yes.
from something in the past, or from a reactive space? Or am I able to notice what's going on in my nervous system, notice what's going on in my body, be so self-aware to recognize that this actually isn't who I really am. This is my trauma. This is my past. This is my pattern. And then to process that, know how to work through that, and then come to that ground place of, okay, this is what's true for me. This is what I need to ask for. This is how I want to share it. And like you said, not from that place of projecting or from reactivity, but from like, this is my truth, and I trust myself, and I am
Yeah.
confident to share what's true for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that was really kind of evident over this time is the healing that I didn't really know how much you could heal with another person. I always kind of assumed that like when you're single, that's when you can like work on all of your stuff, which is true. But I think I carried on a lot of issues from relationship to relationship. And when I would be single, I just would be like, oh, I'm fine. It's great. It's all gone now, because there was no one there to trigger me. Like
Mm-hmm.
there was nothing ever coming up anymore. And of course, I felt like amazing because there was no one, like, there's no reason that I needed to work through those things until like a lot of that finally came up in this relationship. And I was like, I need to look at this now. Like, and whether or not like that leads me to wherever it leads me to, I need to look at this now. And it ended up really like bringing me and my partner together. And it was like such a beautiful experience, but I truly didn't think that that was possible in
Mm-hmm.
a relationship.
Yeah. And there was a point where it was like, okay, am I doing like, I'm going to do this work either way, and I'm going to lean in. And once you got to that place of knowing, okay, I will be okay if
Yeah.
this relationship doesn't work out, but I'm committed to showing up and doing this work, because either I'm going to heal it here, or I'm going to have to heal it in the future. Like
Yeah.
this is the journey, and you understanding that. And yeah, so such an important factor, because it can be easier to say, oh, I'm going to go do this work on my own. Like this relationship just isn't working. It's too stressful.
Yeah.
It's too much anxiety. Like I can't deal with this. And like you went there, like you went super deep. You met your emotions. You
Yeah.
leaned into everything that came up. And yeah, so beautiful to see what has resulted on the other side of that. And
Yeah.
you took a lot of ownership for like, okay, what's mine and what's my partner's, and
Yeah.
like, what do I get to clean up here so that I can have a healthy relationship?
Absolutely. It was such like such a kind of great way to look at it from a different perspective, and like really looking, like seeing my partner as a mirror as to what it was that I also needed to work on.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm so thankful for everything that happened, and like the challenges that I faced personally, because I feel like they were bursting at the seams to like almost screaming at me, like, just notice me, like you need to deal with this. And I think I was kind of pushing it down for a while.
Mhm.
Um, so it's like you come to a point where like I can't live my life like this. It's just not working.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, so much. There's another area that I want to dive into, which is really around your relationships with other women, and
Yes.
really how that has shifted through working on your relationship with yourself. So, like, share a little bit about what that journey has been like for you to be deepening your connection with other women, and maybe how was it before you have done this work with yourself.
Yeah, so I guess before, I've always had a really great group of friends back home that I went to high school with, and they're such an incredible group of women. And I do have, when I moved to London, I was lucky enough to move with some of my best friends from college, so I had them there as well. But I was really like craving more meaningful, deep friendships with like women in particular, because I was really missing my friends from home, and I really wanted to go deeper with the friendships that I had. And like a lot of them were more surface level. And I think anyone can kind of relate to that. If you're moving to a new city, it's hard to meet people when you literally don't know anyone. So it took a while to kind of meet those people, and I did eventually. And then when you and I started working together, it was like, okay, I really want to take these deeper, or expand like my network of people that I have in London. And I think something that I've struggled with is really, like, when I would meet new women in particular, and I don't like it didn't happen with men, like with male friendships, but with women, I would always kind of like just get really, really insecure and kind of like shut down. Because I've had like some experiences in the past with like just, with clickiness and being left out, and like not really finding my people, and always feeling like I was being judged. So I think I would almost judge myself in those situations, and not be like, it was so like hard for me to actually be genuine when I was first meeting people. And so the real me wasn't shining through. And it wasn't like, I knew deep down that I wasn't being authentic. And I just like could feel myself like not being 100% me, and like just closing off a little bit. So as we started working together like that, I noticed such a big shift, and I really put myself out there. I went to a few women's groups like in London, which something that I just never thought to do before, and just really started making that my intention. And then I started meeting so many people. Like after I made that kind of my intention, like just in random ways connecting with people. And I think the more open I was, it was like allowing these other women to be open with me. And it was, even I noticed in my existing friendships that were pretty deep to begin with, it was like a whole nother layer of these women, that these people that I've known for like 2 or 3 years. We just started having like really meaningful, deep conversations, because, sometimes it takes someone to like crack that barrier. Um, and even now I just noticed, like I was back home for a wedding, and I was in a bachelorette party just meeting all new women. And I felt so myself. Like I just felt genuinely 100% me. I wasn't trying to be anyone. I wasn't like, thinking about what I was saying or how things would come across. I was genuinely just me. And we had all had such a good time. And it was like incredible. So that's definitely been a huge shift. And I've been continuing to meet more people here. And I think like as I kind of like I remember talking to you about this in a session once. I was like, I just feel like I love everyone so much. I'm like walking down the street, and I just want to like give this person like a hug, or like I'm talking to this person, and it's just I can see like how much love they have in them. And you were kind of saying like that's a mirror back to how you're feeling about yourself. And that stuck with me. So
Mhm. I got chills again. I feel like
yeah.
there's someone who really needed to hear that. And I know that, as spiritual seekers, we really crave that depth of connection.
Yeah.
Like we all really want that. And so to know that not only did you start calling in new people, but you also were able to deepen your existing friendships. Like that's
Yes.
super powerful. And that's because you were leading with more vulnerability and more openness. I love how you articulated that. So,
Thanks.
oh, so good. Yes. Okay. So this last piece that I want to ask about is around your relationship with your feminine energy.
Yes.
And how do you feel like that has shifted for you?
Oh, that's a good one. So it shifted, it shifted so much. I think like first kind of I've touched on this, but in my relationship, just letting myself take a step back, it has like been so incredible to see the shifts there because it's like really allowed my partner to step into his masculine energy and like take a lead on things. Before I would overplan things, I would like freak out about details and like, would think like if this doesn't get done, like no one's gonna do it. And then it would just cause like this the opposite effect. So really just like stepping back and just like enjoying my time being present in my relationship has been huge. And then with the way that I work as well, I think like having my rituals in the morning and in the evening that help get me into like a feminine energy and into that flow, and then carving out time during the day to like really get what I need to get done has been super helpful. So it's like scheduling that time in advance. So then you have also time to just relax. But then also not being so hard on myself when things don't go to plan. Like I'm way less rigid with everything in my life. And I've just been, you know, it works out so well. Some days I'm not really productive. The other days I want to have more of that structure, but it's just like really giving myself some space and time to be a little bit more structured in my masculine energy. So then the rest of the time I can just kind of chill out and relax. And yeah, just like in the way that I care for myself, I think really like leaning into my emotions and embracing everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, and loving myself through it
Mhm.
has been, yeah,
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, specifically that part about shifting out of that rigidness
Yes.
and having more flexibility is so relieving. Like I can
Yeah.
just feel like the tension in a woman's body when she's in that control rigid, like if
Oh my
one
gosh.
thing doesn't
Yeah.
go how we want it to, then like it creates, a lot of stress or overwhelm, and to be able to like have that exhale and be like, okay, I
Yes.
trust everything's going to work out, it's
Yes.
okay. Yeah, such a big
I,
difference.
yeah. And I think like so much of that goes into just like accepting that there's always going to be uncertainties and you can't control the future. And that was huge for me because I would just worry and stress, but it doesn't do anything except like rob you of the time that you have right now. So I think just being able to like kind of let go of these high expectations I had for everything and just seeing what happens in life and how it turns out. And it's always been like the perfect thing that ends up happening.
Hmm. Yes, it all works out, even when your
Yeah.
brain doesn't think it's going
Yeah.
to. Yeah. Okay, so for our final question here, I
Yes.
would love for you to share a little bit about, what specifically about me as a coach or about our work together did you find to be valuable, supportive, like for you, for me, I think it's so important that we, even when I'm picking a coach, like that we work with someone who we feel really aligned with. And
Yes.
so, yeah, I'd love for you to just share a little bit from your heart, like what was it for you that about my coaching specifically really worked for you?
Well, I think for starters, when we first met, like I just immediately felt this sense of like comfort and safety and warmth with you. I just felt really safe with you. And I loved how like gentle you were and also like your sense of humor and everything. Like I just really had a great feeling about that from the start. And then as we went on, I think the way that you guided me and supported me, it was so like we were always constantly jumping back and forth, whether it be on Vox or on our sessions. You were constantly checking in with me. And there was just this like stream of communication that even when we didn't have sessions, we were always checking in with each other. And the way in which, like I mentioned before, that you gave me space to make my own decisions and, you know, kind of implement these things into my own life, but also being like the most supportive guide and who I knew was always going to be there. And I genuinely felt so safe coming to you with anything. Like you never judged
Mm.
me and you made me feel so safe and just offered the best advice. Like I really loved like opening your voice notes because there are always so many great like nuggets of information in there and I'd be taking notes like but I think yeah, just like how accepting you are and the perspective you were able to offer on every situation, even if you hadn't been through that specifically, you always made it. I felt like I could relate to you through
Mm.
everything.
Thank you so much for sharing. I have
Mm,
absolutely loved our coaching dynamic, and it's
yes.
been, yeah, just as much of a gift for me to work with you. I just love, yeah, who you are and who you've become, and
Thank
I'm
you.
so excited for all of, yeah, everything that's going to continue to unfold and open up for
Yes.
you over these next few months and years. I know you're going to be moving with your partner. Working on this promotion at work. There's a lot of creativity and things that are coming through as far as your personal interests go. So yeah, it's just so amazing what can happen when you're living without crippling anxiety, and when you do
Yes.
have that safety and trust within yourself, and have that self-love that you were talking about before. So I'm just really excited for you and want to say thank you again for being
Um,
here. Thank you for sharing your story and your journey. And yeah, this is gonna be make a really big impact on women's
oh,
lives. So thank you so
oh,
much,
thank
love.
you so much for having me, Amy. This has been incredible.